Kieran, welcome. Thanks very much for joining me. We're back for another episode of Beyond the Inflection Point, the Marin Street Capital podcast. Kieran is joining me from a company called ZeroEyes, to whom we were introduced through one of our earlier podcast guests, Alex Arkowski. Kieran, you've known Alex for 7 or 8 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And Sean, thanks for having me. Yeah, I've known Alex for a while, just through the Philadelphia Veterans Network. He's been great. He's sort of like an OG in that scene. So he's been very, very kind to us. I'll say that.
And I see obviously you're wearing a U.S. Naval Academy hat. By the way, I just had randomly a good friend of mine from high school reach out to me on LinkedIn today to tell me that his son is considering Villanova, my alma mater, um, and that specifically their Naval ROTC program, alongside some other usual suspects like the Naval Academy itself and
Yeah.
Notre Dame and their Naval ROTC program. Um, I I know it's a little bit off script, but what words of advice would you offer to someone like that?
Uh, yeah, I mean, the Naval Academy is not for the faint of heart. I'll say that. And I was among the worst graduates to probably ever come out of that institution. But that being said, it's an incredible place to be from. And the alumni network is incredible, and you're going to meet some of the best friends you're ever going to have in your entire life going through there. That being said, Villanova and Notre Dame are fantastic ROTC programs, and at the end of it, you all come out sort of the same. So hopefully they make better life choices than I made. But yeah, it can't go wrong with any of them.
So, Kieran, it's funny that we open with a thread like that because I've got two 19-year-old children, and I know lots of other parents of college age children. Everyone sort of goes into this phase of life at kind of a different state of readiness. But eventually people do find their paths, right? And I mean, clearly you've found a highly constructive path that we'll talk about in just a moment.
I'll say this: I can wake up every morning knowing that I think that this company is trying to do the right things for the right reasons. So at least I can kind of look at myself in the mirror a little bit, which is awesome because that is not true most places you go.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree, especially for folks that have spent careers in very corporate, bureaucratic like companies. Very challenging environment for sure. So, Kieran, what is Zero Eyes? Tell us a bit about the company.
Yeah, so ZeroEyes is first and foremost, we're a computer vision software manufacturer. Um, and we started the company back in April of 2018 after the Parkland shooting happened. So if you remember Parkland, a shooter staged in the stairwell for about 45 seconds. He had a visible rifle, and there were two security cameras that were on active and recording in that stairwell during that time. And the rifle was visible and brandished the entire time. And the problem is that no one really watches their security cameras. There's about 100 million existing commercial security cameras here in the North American market. The vast majority of them are used forensically. They're used after the purpose, or sorry, after something happens, or used for sort of like an evidence purpose. We looked at Parkland, and then we started looking at other sort of mass shooting incidents. And the one commonality that we kept finding is that a shooter tends to stage somewhere under field of view of an already existing security camera, and the perpetrator tends to have a visible brandished weapon. And we said, what could we do from a technology perspective to help mitigate the next Parkland style shooting? And that was the one sort of commonality was that, could we build a software that could integrate to these cameras that are already in place and detect a visible brandished firearm? So that's exactly what we did. There were five original co-founders. Four of them came out of the SEAL teams where they all worked together, SEAL Team 4. And then the other co-founder was our technical co-founder, who these guys had also known. I was employee number one. I was the first guy they hired. I met them just here in the Philly veteran scene. At some point, we all quit our jobs and we all went all in on this idea of this is a universal application that is widely applicable to the vast majority of security cameras out there on the market. And of course, we had no industry experience. We never built an AI or computer vision company before. None of us had ever, worked in the security space. So it's been a huge learning curve over the last, 7 or 8 years. But what we've sort of fast forward to today, the software is live and in production in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of customers. We're all over public sector, school districts, higher ed, municipalities. We do a ton of work with commercial enterprise. Think of like healthcare, 3PL, big box retail, shopping
Hmm.
malls. Then we have a separate business that handles the federal government, largely the Department of Defense and some of the federal law enforcement agencies, where we're doing other things as well. But yeah, it's been an incredible ride over the last few years. I think we're an incredible growth story. We grew from like six guys in a basement, like a typical sort of American tech startup. And now we're north of 200 employees, spread out all over the country. We have an office in Hawaii. We have an office here right outside of Philadelphia in Conshohocken, and a small office in DC. And we've just been growing this thing. It's been awesome to see.
So, how did you guys get your first customer? Because we've worked with other early stage companies that think, hey, we're going to crack into the education or the government sector, and it always proves a lot more difficult than everybody thinks.
Yeah, it's absolutely brutal. I'll say that. I don't want to sugarcoat this thing. It has not been fun to figure it out. But that being said, we, we had two initial customers. One was a high school in Burlington County, New Jersey. I honestly don't remember how we actually found them, but they were extremely cool with us showing up on weekends and walking around with guns in the hallways to actually prove this thing out. And the superintendent there is actually retiring later this year. His name's Dr. Chris Heilig. Incredible American, a visionary. He intrinsically understood what we were trying to do and the value that it would have for thousands of other schools as we sort of progressed. And let us kind of do whatever we want within reason on a lot of nights and weekends and over holidays to actually sort of build this thing into a minimal viable product and get a beta out there. And the second sort of major customer we have is in the commercial space. And we launched the software in March of 2020. So it took us, almost 2 years to actually build this thing and kind of get it to where we thought it was market ready. March of 2020, we launched largely targeting education. And that was the same month that COVID happened. So schools stopped being schools for a while. So we sort of had to refocus or pivot a little bit into the commercial enterprise world. And our first commercial enterprise customer is actually a major property group and shopping mall chain.
Mm.
And they let us during COVID when no one was in the malls come and train and prove this thing out. And that's exactly what we did. So we were back and forth frequently between Atlanta, which is one of their prime locations during the initial months of COVID, to actually sort of get guys on site and get these get the software integrated into the camera systems and get this thing working. So yeah, we were just sort of fortunate that in some ways that COVID happened right when it did because it allowed us to actually get out into these environments and go train and install and actually do the things that I think have made it successful as a business today.
Hmm. Okay. And then I assume you guys are a subscription-based model?
Yeah, the core platform, the visible firearm detection is delivered as a subscription. It's a license. It's gonna basically correlate to a camera. Everything is included, so the cost of the processing. We're also a 24/7 managed service. We have two 24/7 operation centers. Analysts are going to look at every alert that's our platform prior to a customer
Mm.
getting it. This is how we manage false positives and make sure that only customers are only getting things that we truly believe are actual threats. So all that stuff sort of is wrapped up into one license cost. We try to make it as simple and easy as possible for end users.
Okay. How pervasive are actual positive threat indicators?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, we see guns almost every single day right now in
Wow.
the real world. They're not always necessarily a threat. Sometimes it's law
Mm.
enforcement. Sometimes it's non-lethal types of guns, airsoft guns or BB guns. The reality is, like, I have three kids. We see guns in schools almost every single day right now, and we're in thousands and thousands of schools. A lot of it's like social media flexing, like where kids will bring in a gun and film themselves with it. There's a fair amount of gang stuff that happens in school districts that we're involved with. A lot of that's bleed over, from gang life into school districts, which is obviously concerning. And then, every once in a while, it'll be like a parent or an adult showing up to campus with a brandished gun for whatever reason.
Uh, Licensed or unlicensed or both, I guess.
You know, from where we sit, it doesn't necessarily matter. Like if somebody has a visible unholstered firearm at a
Hmm.
school in particular, our feelings that someone somewhere should need to know. The reality is most school districts, even in a state that lets you openly carry, like you're still not supposed to bring a gun into a school. It's sort of a universal thing. So yeah, for us, it's a threat.
That's I- disappointing, I guess, but
Yeah.
leads to some sense of gratitude that a company like yours exists.
Yeah, before starting this thing, we had no idea that guns show up as many times as they do under field of view cameras. It's and we're only on a small subset of cameras here in the United States, so it's kind of crazy to see that. We also do a lot of work in municipalities, like big cities, where it's less of like the active shooter threat that we're sort
Mhm.
of looking for, but it's more of the gangs, the armed robberies, escalations of dispute, all that kind of stuff. And I think this year alone, in one of our major city customers, I think we're close to 40 arrests, just based on zero arrest detections, just since turn of the year. So this stuff is out there. It's identifying bad actors and it's helping take them off the street. So it's really encouraging to see that.
That's fantastic. It's kind of a recurring theme. Society worries about some problem du jour, and maybe loses a little bit of faith around human ingenuity and the capacity for that constant innovation to address problems, no matter how severe they might be. So this is a great example of ingenuity attempting to overcome, something much more basic and point to human weakness, if you will. Um, are you guys at the point where demand exceeds your capacity to respond to demand? How are you in terms of engaging with prospective customers? I mean, I hear the story and I feel like, okay, there are very few schools, very few municipalities that should not want or need your product.
Yeah, I mean, I think responding to demand has been a recurring challenge. We are. I think there's two ways to look at it, right? You obviously want sales to outpace installation. That just means you're growing as a company. So there's always going to be an implementation backlog, at least if we're growing. Um, the tricky thing is like, how do you make sure that implementation is not also growing at such a rate that you're never going to, kind of get to the end of it. So that's a good problem to have. And honestly, money and funding helps fix that. Like we can raise through that and hire what we need there just operationally. Um, the larger challenge I think right now that we're seeing, particularly in public sector, is that a lot of the funding has dried up.
Hmm.
Particularly, a lot of the federal money has fallen out of public sector infrastructure. I think it's going to come back. I think that a lot of school districts in particular didn't do a great reading of the tea leaves when the new administration said that they were going to cut funding in certain places. Um, so, it's not just a ZeroEyes problem. I think it's most, companies that are, selling to the public sector have seen some downturn as far as, prospective customers go. I can tell you this, like if we made this thing, available at $1 tomorrow, we would see a huge amount of demand for it. So, the question is not that, people don't want it. It's always funding and fitting it into really tight public sector budgets. On the commercial enterprise side, I mean, we have seen a huge amount of demand, and it's really there's three things that are sort of driving that market. The first is future regulatory action coming down the space, and it's almost certainly going to happen. If you look at sort of how like fire code was put into building
Mm.
code in the last 50 or 60 years, we think weapons detection is going to be a similar journey that fire code had. Um, and this is obviously, getting guys like OSHA involved and putting down rules in the space, as well as a lot of the different state agency regulators. Doesn't have to be ZeroEyes necessarily, but some sort of capability to detect, hostile weapons in publicly facing buildings is almost certainly going to happen here in the United States. The other piece is insurance, particularly for commercial enterprise folks.
Mhm.
We're starting to see a lot of insurance underwriters and carriers and brokers get involved in the space because they don't want their customers to lose insurability in the event that something happens. So that's been a major driver. And then the third piece is going to be legislative. We're starting to see, some states put down rules and like rules in a statute around this capability. California is a great example. California put weapon screening requirements into healthcare
Mhm.
facilities in California last year. We've started to see a lot of states, particularly within public sector and schools, put appropriated dollars out for this type of capability. ZeroEyes, fortunately, has been the recipient of the vast majority of that. We have a great public sector team that is out there educating policymakers all the time on the capability. Um, but yeah, I mean, we're starting to see these drivers. So the question around demand is always like, you know, is like when are these drivers actually going to kick into full gear? I think it's going to take a while, but um, I think the reality is that this is going to be a ubiquitous capability across every facet of North American life, at least within physical security and risk management. It's just a matter of time to get there.
Okay. What other companies are out there that are trying to do something like what you guys are doing?
Yeah, we've been fortunate to kind of set the pace here in this particular niche of the industry. There's a ton of companies out there almost every month that are popping out. A lot of Silicon Valley companies, a lot of companies that are looking at like large vision models and that kind of thing too. Saying they can do this. The problem that most of them have had, number one, is when they go to raise money, they're getting benchmarked on our performance, which is really tough to compete with that, just to be honest. Number two is that unless you have sort of deep expertise and specialty in delivering this, it's really hard. It's a really hard technical and operational challenge to pull off.
Mhm.
So we've seen quite a few companies try this and fail for whatever reason. There's still a couple companies that are sort of like I would consider them sort of head to head, peer-to-peer competitors. We only ever see one company really when it comes down to actual deals and RFPs, at least in public sector. Um, you know, we also, I mean, we're competing against anyone that's spending money into physical security. So to some degree, we're also competing against legacy guard providers, although we're partnering with a lot of them too. We're certainly competing from a resourcing perspective with like the metal detection guys or the weapon screening guys. But again, we're also partnered with quite a few of them. I think our approach or perspective is that, good security comes in layers. Like we're one layer of a multi-layered onion, where metal detection and security guards are certainly viable pieces of those layers. Um, we are laser focused at winning our sort of niche of the market, just because it's a universal use case and it's hugely scalable. Like I said, 100 million existing endpoints just here in the North American market alone. We are barely scratching the surface of that right now, and you know, from where we sit, there's room in the space probably for 10 ZeroEyes just based on that, right? Obviously, we'd love to own the whole market. I think we're doing a good job getting there, but the reality is that the market is so huge that it could consume us really easily.
Sure. I, so I assume you guys are constantly developing, upgrading the product, and then pushing out updates,
Yeah.
like most software providers do. How has the rapid evolution of the AI space and its products impacted the way you guys think about product, delivering product, and even designing the product?
Yeah, so I mean, to your point, we are constantly pushing upgrades to the platform. We have a really expansive product roadmap too that we're working on right now. Going into like a potential Series C round later this year, early next year. A big piece of the product roadmap is, the build by partner from a capability perspective. Are we looking at adding like large vision models somewhere into the roadmap? Does it make sense to partner, build, or buy that? Are we looking at doing other object classifiers, like particularly things around like knife detection is a very, very common one that customers want to see. Stuff like integrations into drones and robotics, things that are going to be really, really heavy on the AI side when it comes to vision and perception. These are all things that I mean, we have an incredible R&D team. We have an incredible AI machine learning team. We have an incredible development team. So these are things that we're constantly working with all these teams to kind of figure out like what the future looks like. Um, as far as like the company like sort of using more cutting edge or bleeding edge Gen AI tools, yeah, we're absolutely doing it. It's part of the workflows right now. We'll be looking to incorporate certain facets of it in the next year or so into pieces of the product. It's probably similar to like what most other sort of tech companies are looking at doing, not just from an efficiency standpoint. I think about it more of like a customer efficiency standpoint. You know, one of the I think like the core piece of the platform is our verification service. So that is largely a manual task, right? Like it requires an operator to do a lot of outreach. Um, Parts of it are automated, we automate direct to 911, which is really really useful. Um, but parts of it aren't. So I think we're looking at adding automation there, leveraging things like LLM and LVM. Certainly on the customer success side too, we have a really good customer success team that's like basically isn't lockstep with our customers all the time. Some of the questions are, well, can we add stronger, more 24/7 coverage on customer success with some of these tools? So, yeah, team's absolutely looking at it. I think we're already seeing efficiency gains just like internally in the company. Like I know my team's using these things like constantly, so seems good.
That's great. You mentioned a Series C round. Uh, Obviously, that implies you guys have funded the company with venture through at least an A and a B. What did you guys do before that? How did you get to your Series A? Take me through, some of
Yeah.
the steps you had to take to get there.
Yeah, so I think we raised our initial sort of seed round, which I think follows most sort of typical like basement startups, right? Like it was a friends and family to start, and then a couple of different tranches of a seed round. We did that through local folks here, mostly in the Philly area, so high net worth and angels.
Mhm.
Um, I think once we figured out that we had a workable product and we saw enough kind of customer demand right out of the gate that we were very set on having to raise some sort of venture money. Really hard to bootstrap in the space unless you're starting with deep pockets. Just to be honest, like just hiring these engineers alone is not cheap. So we did like a $5.5 million seed round. And then we went into a Series A almost immediately after, and we ended up doing a $21 million Series A round back in 2020, sort of like the height of the frothiness on
Good,
valuations and
good
that kind of
timing.
stuff. Good timing. Um, Led by an incredible investor named Michael Kim from Octave Ventures, who truly understands the vision of what we're trying to do here and realizes that this is like not a quick return on money type of scheme. This is like we're building for long-term success here. And then last year we did a $53 million Series B led by Sorensen. Long time tenured tech investors, great track record. Had quite a few other folks come in as well, but yeah, we're at the point now where we want to start investing into additional products and services. So going back to the product roadmap, we feel like we have a pretty good handle on sort of the core product, and I think we're sort of the clear market leader in this space. Um, so we're not trying to shift attention necessarily away from that. Like obviously we want to pour more gas on that fire as well. We're at the point where diversification of products makes the most sense for us. So, we're spending a lot of time, like I said before, like sort of a build by partner sort of roadmap, looking at other capabilities and companies. We've obviously known a lot of companies now in the space that have been operating for a while, have a pretty good sense of their track records and sort of what they're doing for their customers. Um, we're excited around drones and robotics in particular, having a solid impact on the space, and we'd obviously like to be a part of that. And then there's some things too on the defense side of the business that are interesting to us that we're sort of fleshing out right now. So
I, it's been a while, so maybe this memory fades, but can you remember with any sort of vividity folks that said, "Oh, this idea will never work"?
yes, I have a mental running list of all of them in my head, and it's like the last thing I think about before I go to sleep every night. No, I'm just kidding. But the reality is yes. Like we have heard like whatever like the old adage like you're gonna hear 100 no's before one yes. Like that's certainly true in our case. I think that, maybe it wasn't quite 100, but we certainly heard a lot of no's to start. And I still think that we come across investors and growth equity guys that, for whatever reason, don't like the space or they think there's liability and all the different things, right? Not everyone is always going to see our vision the way that we see it. Um, I mean, we have a lot more data around sort of the vision at this point than we did, 6 or 7 years ago. And going back to like those major market drivers around regulatory, insurance, and legislative, I mean, we have seen an incredible amount of data come through just in the last 18 months alone that sort of paint the picture that this is going to be a highly regulated space in the future, which I think a lot of investors like making that bet, or at
Hmm.
least that's what we're hoping. And they're going to bet on the one pony they think has the deepest moat and sort of the highest walls. And I think right now in the space, like that's us. We put together a really credible team. Like we have an incredible engineering team. We have, multiple patents around sort of the core product. We've quite a lot of other sort of just like general trade secret type stuff. And then we're out there executing. Like I look at sort of like the competitive landscape. Like I just don't see other people executing the same way that we're executing. So we need to keep sustaining that, obviously. And like I said before, keep throwing gas on that fire. But if you're a growth guy looking at the space, like I don't see you looking really anywhere else. And that's one of the things we're going to have to figure out as we sort of progress here and look at like the next round or if something else made sense. I mean, we're also at the point too where I think we'll start getting serious acquisition looks from some of the bigger folks in the space.
No doubt.
So yeah,
I, okay, so this interesting. You guys have what, five co-founders? Is
yeah,
that right?
five original co-founders. That's right.
Yeah. So most, I mean, venture capital rarely sees a company with five co-founders, and maybe that's, one of the things you heard from some of the naysayers along the way. How do you guys make that dynamic work?
Um, you know, the other thing I should have said too, roughly 200 employees, probably something like 75% or 80% of the company's a military veteran. We hire a lot of veterans. Veterans are mission critical minded. Like that's just how we operate. We're very
They're
big
team oriented.
team oriented. So yeah, it's a little bit unconventional, and I think probably in the early days there were probably questions around that. Um, four of the five all served together, and two of them went to Wharton, got their MBA together. The other guy went to Columbia MBA, and the other guy went to Vanderbilt MBA. So we've got a bunch of I don't think credibility was an issue there. I think it was more along the lines of like, who actually like who's going to operate what piece of the business.
Hmm.
I think we found like a really good natural rhythm. You know, like Rob Huberty's our COO, runs operations as the COO. Sam Alimo is our chief revenue officer, so sales, marketing, partnerships all kind of roll up to him. Justin Brooks runs customer success. I think that we've found the right roles for folks, sort of based on their natural skill sets, and they've been crushing it. And then Mike Leahy is our CEO. This is Mike's baby from the beginning, so he has obviously stayed as CEO, and he's doing all the right things. He's keeping us, capitalized. He's keeping us growing, and doing quite a lot of thought leadership, which I know he hates doing, but he's really good at it. So he's the guy that'll go on cable news and talk about the company when we have to do that kind of thing.
That's fantastic. I can tell you from my perspective, in the venture ecosystem and the entrepreneurial world, there are no shortage of good or very good or even great ideas, but the folks that can marry a good to great idea with great execution, that's your recipe for success right there. And I share your sentiment that folks with military backgrounds who have spent time in pressure situations in a team dynamic, they're well suited for execution for sure. Um, Tell us about your role with the company and how you got involved as employee number one.
Yeah, yeah, it's just fortuitous. I was in Philly. I moved to Philly after I left the military. My wife's been here. She's a lawyer, so she's barred here. Um, I went into consulting. It was like the first job that was offered to me when I left the military. So I did that with PwC in Philly for about a year and a half. great experience. Love doing it. Learned a lot. I met these guys, I think randomly through a friend. Like they were basically like, hey, you got to hear what these guys have going on. They soft pitched me on this idea. I was like, holy shit, like if this thing works, like this is an incredible like force multiplier that should be everywhere. Um, and yeah, I mean, I started working for free on the side while I was at consulting, helping these guys with like pitch decks and other things. And like I said, when we raised a little bit of money, we all sort of quit our jobs and went in on this full time. Um, didn't pay ourselves for a while. So, none of our wives were like super happy about that for several years. But yes, and my initial role was just kind of like trying to help figure out growth acceleration. So I touched almost every piece of the business. I guess like technically I was like the chief of staff, but the reality is I was just trying to help make sure that like we were executing on the things we had to execute that were in front of us. Helped hire a lot of the folks, like a lot of like the workhorses of the company that are still here, which has been awesome. Was able to hire a bunch of people in my network that I thought were really good and really sharp, who have just stayed here and grown with the company over the last few years. And then about 3 years ago, it was somewhat unconventional. We were trying to figure out what to call the team, but we said, we're doing more and more like high level policymaker engagement, which is sort of weird as like as a small tech startup. So we peeled off a few people in the company that have been here for a while and have touched multiple pieces of the business, and we built what we're calling a strategy team. And the way I like to think of it, like strategy, at least at ZeroEyes, like we have the longest term view of the company. So we were doing everything from like your typical kind of corp dev roadmap, like looking at potential M&A and all that kind of stuff, all the way through, owning government affairs, where, we're actively working, with policymakers probably in 10 or 11 states right now, plus federal, um, chasing everything from like appropriated money for the ZeroEyes capability, all the way through, getting involved in weird AI policy discussions up on Capitol Hill because we don't want to get legislative out of existence, 2 or 3 years down the road.
Hmm.
So I have a team of five. We also work a lot of the special projects for the company. Right now, trying to figure out the insurance market is a really big one. So I have a guy who's like just focused on that. And then we also do a lot of stuff that like honestly nobody else wants to do in the company. So think of like, the strategic accreditation roadmap, things like SOC 2 and ISO
Yep.
27001 and FedRAMP. A lot of that stuff started with with our team, and then obviously these are like multi-team efforts and pretty big lifts across the company. But we've been successful in getting those things going. And just general biz dev, like, we're out there, we talk to a lot of people, we help qualify deals and kick it over to the sales team when we have to. So it's been
I,
fun. We're on the road almost every single week as a team.
yeah,
So
I was just gonna say, it sounds like your biggest challenge might be figuring out how to turn off work at some point.
yeah, I mean we've hired a lot of passionate people that kind of get where this is going. So yeah, that's all. I mean, don't talk to my wife, but that's probably her biggest thing too, right?
You raise an interest, or you raise a really important point that I want any aspiring entrepreneurs to sort of accept and acknowledge before they proceed further on their entrepreneurial journeys. This really is an all-in effort. Like it requires quite a bit of family support to stay on this journey.
Yeah. Um, I'd say on the executive team, we've had multiple divorces in the last several years. Like it's tough. It is this is like a lifestyle and a calling, and it's not just a job. We have like a banner at the office that says like all in all the time, and that's the reality of it. And we also run a 24/7 business, right? I mean, we have two 24/7 operation centers that are, doing the thing every day, across tens and tens and tens of thousands of cameras. So yeah, this is this is our life. That's like the only way I can describe it. Like this is our life 24/7, for the foreseeable future. That being said, like we have a good group of folks that are committed to doing it. And this is what our customers also expect too. So we have to deliver for them.
Yep. Okay, cool. Maybe a couple more questions for you before we wrap up. Uh, what would you perceive to be the company's biggest challenge at this point?
Yeah, I think it's I think the biggest short-term challenge is probably a lack of federal funding that historically would trickle down into states and school districts and that kind of thing. We've seen a lot of money dry up with the expiration of these COVID funds. Basically, school districts use those I mean, it was like crack for these guys
Hmm.
for a long time. Like that's just the best way to describe it. So we need to see budgets get right-sized and sort of rebalanced, and then things like us get put back into budgets at the right allotment. So I mean that's been a challenge, and I know I sound like I'm griping. Like every company in our space right now is dealing with the same thing. A medium-term challenge is how quickly and where we grow the business.
Hmm.
There's a lot of options in front of us. I think that the hardest thing for a lot of us is to say no, particularly when a lot of us see what the potential could be. Luckily, Mike Lahiff, our CEO, his superpower is saying no to things. So he is guiding the ship here with very experienced hands doing that. That being said, like we're going to have to grow products and services as we grow the business. So we have to make a lot of like pretty tough decisions here in the next year and a half on how we're going to go do that and how we're going to execute on it. And then the biggest long-term challenge, um, I'd say is probably something on the tech side.
Hmm.
And I haven't quite figured out exactly what it's going to be yet. I mean, I think these large vision models are really interesting. Um, right now, they're not super price sensitive for our customers. I mean, they're going to be very expensive. They take a lot of compute. The models themselves are not super performative. Like they're not great, but they're always improving. And this is one of the things that our product team and our dev team, like we are constantly trying to stay on top of these things
Hmm.
because we didn't build a company around that, but we may have to pivot at some point, particularly when the stuff gets cheaper and just better and more performant, better performance. So we build a lot of stuff proprietary. Like we own all of our own data, which is atypical to a lot of different computer vision companies. Data is a huge moat for us. So another long-term challenge I could see is if somehow they're like somehow other competitors get data parity with us, which is going to be really tough to do at this point, but it's not necessarily impossible.
Hmm.
So yeah, these are all things that like our team is like thinking about constantly, trying to figure out what the future looks like.
Makes sense. And then last question for you, Kieran, before we wrap up. It, you had to name one thing that our audience could do to help you or the company. This audience consists of investors, other founders, service providers to the above, folks aspiring to be entrepreneurs. What's one thing they could do to be helpful?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we love interaction with the company. So, sort of following what we're putting out on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or these other social platforms is always awesome. I'll say this, like my team specifically is designed to have a conversation with anyone that you think would be interested for whatever possible reason. So that could be from an investment standpoint, going to the next round. That could be looking at like a more strategic partnership, like some sort of joint venture, et cetera. Um, but also, obviously a lot of people listening are probably parents, or they probably work in some sort of corporate office building. Um, just in the last few weeks alone, like just thinking back to like 340
Hmm.
Park Ave a few weeks back. Um, this kind of thing happens in the blink of an eye. It can happen anywhere. Um, those folks told us several years ago that it would never happen at that location. Um,
Ooh.
and the reality is that it absolutely can, and these things are almost impossible to predict. ZeroEyes is designed to help mitigate that exact scenario that happened there. So we are always happy to take referrals from folks that work in places like this that are concerned, or maybe they're not even fully aware of like what the security at that establishment looks like. We are happy to take those calls and just have a conversation with the folks that own or operate the building. Same deal with school districts. I think parents are probably our number one sort of referral program at this point within K through 12. I know that like I'm putting this into my kids' school as soon as we get better cameras, which is hopefully been funded at this point. Um, I'm just a huge believer in it. So parents come to us all the time asking if they can get this into their kid's school. We are really, really flexible on how we do this. So we want to put this everywhere for a price point that makes it easy for these districts to approve, or these non-public schools to approve. So we're willing to work with you. So if anyone in the network wants to make, introductions or recommendations, like we're happy to chase those down and follow up on those.
That's fantastic suggestion. I think those will be easy to come by. So, Kieran, we're going to wrap it up there. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank the audience for tuning in to another episode of Marin Street Capital's Beyond the Inflection Point. And we'll be back with another episode soon.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for having me, Sean.